Hey everyone, it's Ashley from Lovely Commotion. Thanks for joining me this Sunday. I am glad you're here, and today I want to talk all about games. If you've been around my blog or watched some of my videos, you may know that I love games. I love bringing games into my classroom because games and fun go hand in hand, right? Like even as adults, we still play games because they're fun and they are engaging. And many times we may even be learning something, but we don't realize it because it's fun. And that's the same reason why I love games in my classroom. So whenever I can combine games and my children in the classroom and learning, I do it. So we play a lot of games. We don't just play games at small group, we also play them at circle time, and we play them during centers, and we are just a game loving classroom. So today I want to share with you some of the games that we'll be doing here in February. And these games I have been kind of putting together as monthly games, and they follow the same premise. They're all the same games with just different themes. Because I found that it really helps children kind of know what to expect when they're playing the game. They can play it more independently that way. And I've also found that just adding a little different twist to a game makes it all brand new to them, even though they're practicing the same skill. So today I have 14 games in my arsenal that I want to share with you that we have been doing. I will tell you that we usually do these games in small group first. Some of them go into the math center afterwards or somewhere in the classroom where they can go and play it. Most of these games can be played single player. There's a couple that are two player. And I tried to keep it so that these games wouldn't need a lot of extra pieces for you to go find. So if you have mini erasers that are themed from, the Target Bullseye Playground or even the Dollar Tree, those are great for these games. Also dice. Of course, we all have so many little dice around our classroom, and those are something that I use. And then I also will do some spinner games too, because those are fun as well. And I've got a picture in there of how you can make a spinner pretty easily. But I wanted to show you the 14 games and kind of show you what they go over. So each game does cover its own specific skill, and it was created for that skill, but it also many times covers lots of different skills. And especially when you add another student in or multiple students in to play together, because then you're adding the social element of it too. So I want to get started, show you these games, kind of explain them to you. Maybe these are, maybe you'll hear a game that you haven't heard of before and you could bring it into your classroom. I have this set, a February set and a March set, and I'm working on the rest, but I have these available for you in my TPT store if it's something you think you want, but you definitely can always make your own games. It's usually pretty easy to make. They're usually pretty simple, but I just want to give you some ideas because maybe that's something that you guys could do. And sometimes they're not even games, like win or lose games. Sometimes they're just an activity that I call a game, and that just brings yet another element to the excitement. And I did want to just point out, when we play games in my classroom, I always tend to focus on the learning aspect. So even if it is a winning game, maybe it's where one player wins, right? I don't focus on the winning part. I actually make sure that all students win and get to the end or whatever it might be before we move on, so that way it really sends a message of, we are not looking for a winner in this game, we're helping our brain grow. And I say that all the time because sometimes we have some pretty competitive kiddos, and my goal is never to see who won or lost, because if they're both playing and they're both learning, then that's winning. And so I really just go ahead and set that stereotype, or not that stereotype, but that standard in my classroom, that we all play games for fun. We play them so our brain can learn, and we do it in a fun way, and we lift each other up. And yes, there will be a time where children need to deal with the art of losing, but when learning is involved and that is my focus, that's not where I place that. So let's go ahead and get started. I've got some pictures here to show you. I figured that would be easier than trying to like hold them up and stuff. So the first game is a path game, and path games are they're very widely used, right? So basically, you just have a starting space and an ending space. Use a die. Or you could use numeral cards. You could change it to numeral cards so that they would start recognizing the numeral if you wanted to do that. But it is a lot of counting with one-to-one correspondence. And while I have kiddos in my class this year that can do so many amazing things with numbers, I was super surprised at how jumping from space to space was actually pretty challenging for them. Because, yes, they're used to counting things one to one, but they do have a trouble with jump one, jump two. And so, that is something that we still play, even though it is something they can do. Many of them can recognize that this is a 4 on the dice and move 4 or count 4, but the moving 4 and jumping the spaces has proven to need a little practice. So this can be played one player, just trying to get to the end. It could be played two player. And again, if I played two player, I would make sure that both of my friends got to the end before the game was over. And we're just basically practicing that counting and jumping the spaces with one-to-one correspondence. Again, you can use a dice, you could use a numeral spinner, you could use numeral cards, anything that maybe you just pull a couple of numerals that your kiddos are struggling with, then you use those. And so they're constantly practicing. They're basically practicing recognizing that numeral without even realizing it because they're playing the game. So path games, very, very commonplace in our classrooms, but they are still very important. Don't kind of push them to the side and think, well, they know how to do that, because I was surprised this year when I thought, oh yeah, this will be good, and they all were struggling with jumping from space to space. And then just the turn taking element when you add a second person is also awesome. So that's the first game, a path game. And then we also like to play Numeral Cover Up. So this one is basically a one-player game. You could play with two players if you wanted to. You could just take turns covering up the numeral. But it's so super simple. And you can see in the picture I have some magnet numbers. You could even put them in like a basket, and they pull one out and they have to find the matching one if your students are at that level. Or you could roll a dice or two dice, right? And have them find that numeral after they've counted. You could use dot cards, cards with just dots on them to represent a numeral. And so they would have to count and then find it. There's lots of different ways to use numeral cover up. And when they get them all filled up, it's done. They've won. And they really like that sense of accomplishment. That sense of filling in all those circles is highly motivating to them, and that's why this game seems to work. There's lots of great cover-up games, and this one's no different. They just absolutely love being able to cover it up. And then the next month I can replace this same exact game where they're doing the same exact thing, but it's in a different shape. It's got different erasers, and it just becomes new again. But I am getting them to practice something that they need to practice multiple times without the boredom, without the stigma of learning isn't fun type of thing. So numeral cover up, super easy one. You could definitely make your own board on that one. This is a subitizing game. And this one I always like to play with students because it's very hard to get my students to not count the dots on a die, even though they may know exactly how many dots are on that die. So we start with one dot die, roll it. They look at the dot, and in this picture, you can see there's a 4 up there. We know that. We don't have to count the 4. We want children to be able to get to that place where they can see those numerals already on the dice and can recognize that number, that quantity. And so then they're matching the quantity on the dice to the quantity on the board, and then they're covering that. And so they get to where they can cover all of them. But it's not an easy task for them to not want to count them. And so we always start, when I do subitizing, I usually start with the die first, and then maybe I'll move to some subitizing cards, where the dots are not in the same place as the die, and start to see if our brains can pick that up, because we want them to start seeing these sets without counting them, because then they can start pulling apart 4 into 2 and 2, right? And then we're looking at some early addition concepts. So Subitizing game is one I generally do not put out in the Math Center, because I want to be right there to kind of coach them through this game. And you could play it 2 players, sure, they could just take turns, or you can play it 1 player, whatever works. But basically, the main idea behind this is trying to get them to look at a quantity and know how many are there without having to count them. And usually, I like to see children be able to do this up to 5 or 6, so that's why there's 5 or 6 on this board. So that is Subitizing. And then this one is such a favorite. Oh boy, do they love it. And I usually don't pull it out till later in the year because it is multi-step. So basically what they do, this is a graphing game. They put the mover on the big circle in the corner of the game board. They roll a dice, or you could have them pick a numeral card if you want to practice on recognizing numerals. And they move the mover that many spaces. And whatever space they land on, they reflect that over in their graph. Okay, you could use dot markers, you could use crayons, or you could just laminate it and use little erasers. It's up to you. But like you can see on the graph on the right there, that Cupcake has 2, Candy has 1. So the goal is to see which type of treat wins by getting to the top. So we're working on graphing. We're working on starting from the bottom and going up. We're working on collecting data from the game board and moving that data over to the graph. And so as you can see, that's kind of a lot of concepts, right? They've got to roll the dice, they've got to move the mover, they've got to see where they landed, and then they've got to take that data and they've got to bring it over to the graph. And then they've got to continue the graphing until one wins. But I will tell you, this game induces some serious squealing and excitement, especially if there are animals involved. Sometimes I'll have the choices be animals, right? Which animal is going to make it to the top on the graph, and that just creates even more crazy, exciting fun. And you'll start hearing things like, oh, Cookie only has 2 left. I want Cookie to win. And so no child is really winning, right? But they kind of get behind one of those choices and they start rooting for it. And it's absolutely adorable and super fun. And I just love hearing them compare, like, well, Cupcake's probably going to win because they only have 1 left. And Cookie's probably not going to win at all because it only has 1 on the board. Like, they just start justifying all this and it's making sense in their brains. And I also love that every time we play this, the result is different. And this, sometimes they may have played and it's another friend's turn, another group's turn. And we usually play this in pairs. They'll still stand around and watch because they're so interested to see who wins on their turn. So this one, if you haven't tried it, is awesome. It's absolutely awesome. You could also do it just even with a die, like, those dies that you can stick pictures in. You could put pictures in those and reflect them on a graph, and they could just roll a die. That would simplify the steps that they had to take. But I love that they're having to go through and go, okay, first I got to roll, then I got to move, then I got to transfer the data. And that is why I generally don't do it until later in the year. But it's super fun, and they are grasping some seriously big skills when they're playing this game. So if you haven't tried it, this one is one I definitely recommend. Another game is the positions game, and this is working more on positional words and placements and things like that. So there's a bingo board. I have 4 bingo boards. I'll grab 4 kids. And this is something that we do in small group. I generally don't put this out unless they're really wanting to play it. Sometimes you'll find some that want to be the caller, right? They may call out the bug next to the jar. And so they are looking at all the choices and having to make the choice based on what they're hearing. And so I like them having to take the information that they're hearing, process that, and choose the best fit for that. And also, obviously, understanding the positional words that go with that. And so we generally play bingo like this. Since there's only 9 spots, we generally play it as a blackout. And that generally gets everybody winning at the same time. And again, it's not a focus, right? There's no prize for winning. These are games for learning. And many times when we are done playing it and everybody's got a blackout, we all cheer. And I just mention and talk to them about your brain did so good. Your brain's growing today. You're learning so many great things. Isn't it fun to play games when you're learning? And I really try to hammer those ideas home because that's just not what my focus is when I'm doing this with them. I'm wanting them to have fun learning. That is the main focus. And I don't want a child to be upset and leaving our learning time upset because they didn't win, right? That's really not going to make them want to play games anymore. And so I want them to feel good around these games. And they are just preschoolers, so we don't really have to hammer home the winning and losing quite as often as maybe we want to do with older children. So position games, also Fill It Up. And Fill It Up's a pretty common game, and I really like it because it's 2-player and they sit across from each other. So you'll see on the board there's hearts facing one direction, then hearts facing the other direction. That's because they sit across from each other. So this is a 2-player game, and they will have 10 erasers on their side to help fill up their board. And so they spin the spinner, and if you can see on this spinner, I have a paper clip that's opened up, and then I have a push pin on this one that I stick into sticky tack, and that helps it keep it down on the table too, which is helpful. I also have invested in some actual spinners that you can like pop off the spinny top part and punch a hole and stick them together. That's been super helpful too. I'll usually just take them off when I'm done with that game for the month and use them for the next one, but this works just as well. And basically they just take turns spinning, counting the number of hearts that they landed on, and filling in that many on their game board. Now this is a quick game. This is a game that's great for those children that have the lower attention spans that you're trying to kind of extend that attention span, because it is a shorter game. If you land on 5, you're already halfway there, right? But I also like it because we are working on going from left to right, return sweep left to right. And it also resembles 5 and 5, just like a 10 frame. So there's lots of goodness going in here that they don't even realize. But I really try to help them start at the left, go left to right, just like when we read, and then come back around. And so I like that aspect of the game board a lot. I like that it's a pretty quick game, and I like that it's a 2-player game because we are having to wait our turn. Many times they'll just play it back to back because they love it. They want to see who will get there first. Again, when I'm sitting with them, I always make sure that both children get it all the way full before we celebrate. And many times I will phrase that as, this child is our first winner. Who's going to be our next winner? So really focusing on just what we're learning and that we can all be winners in that sense. So that is the Fill It Up game. And this one would be super easy to replicate as well, just placing 10 stickers. And even if you wanted to do more, maybe you wanted to do 15, and that could make the game even longer. And maybe they don't have to spin a spinner. Maybe they can just roll a dice. So it's pretty simple to make this game, but it does pack some good educational punch in there, because not only are they filling up spots with one-to-one correspondence, they're adding on to those spots, right? So they, like in the picture, there's already 3 hearts filled. The next time they go, they're going to extend on to that. And that has been something I found is sometimes hard for them. They want to start all over and refill that up. So another kind of benefit to that one. Also, I have some sequencing events in there. I find that by this time in the year, the simple sequencing they generally have gotten under control. But when I add in more complex pictures, like the ones that you see in here where they're making a Valentine, that tends to be a little bit harder. So they're having to really look at what is going on in the picture and look at the details, which I love because, again, we're going to use that in other areas. We're going to use that when we are pretend reading a book. We're going to look at the pictures and look at the details and see what's really going on. And so this requires them to really look at each step and think about how they would do that. And then there's two other choices. There's a groundhog one and there's a making chocolate milk one, because who doesn't love chocolate milk, right? And so those have been good. The mat has been very helpful because sometimes without the mat, they don't really know how to line them up. They don't know how to organize the cards in a sequence. And so that has just helped tremendously, because what will happen first, we're going to put it on one, and then what happens next, we're going to put it on two, and then by then they've pretty much figured out, okay, the rest go here and here. And so that's been interesting to watch, to see if they can pick up on those details in those pictures. So that's sequencing. I also have this one. So this one is a hiding game. And so I know it's kind of hard to tell, but these hearts that are on the Love Bakery countertop are not part of the picture. They are cut out hearts. And I didn't laminate any of these yet when I took the pictures, because I knew it would just glare really bad. But they're little hearts, and there are 5 of them. And I show them, here's the Love Bakery. Here are 5 heart cookies in the Love Bakery. Let's count them. And we count them. And then I go and have them hide their eyes. So turn around, hide your eyes. Some of the cookies are going to go missing. They're going to go missing. They're going to be in the jar. And so I stick however many cookies I choose under the jar that's on the picture there. And then they turn back around. How many are missing? How many are there? There's 4. How many were there? There were 5. You will be surprised at how quickly they put this together. And so what we're looking at right now is early subtraction skills, and even reversing that in their head for early addition skills. So it's a little bit of a more complex game, and many times they will need to see what's under the jar before they fully understand how the game works. But then the more you do it, the more you practice it, you start realizing, oh, they're getting it, right? And so I usually say this game for after the first of the year in general. Obviously there's always other times that I may break it out, but this one has been super interesting to watch, because you're kind of getting a little bit of a glimpse into their brain of if they are starting to understand those early addition and subtraction skills. So that is the hiding game. Then we also have sorting. This one, obviously, by the end of the year, many of them got this down. At the beginning of the year, I like to pull this out because I want to see what they can do as far as color. And then you can even take the pieces and sort them by type. And that is helpful too, because not only do they can be sorted by color, they also could be sorted by type. Like you can see in the picture, there's some envelopes, there's some cards. And so that's another way to kind of see where they are in sorting. So that one's a pretty simple one for me to set out and kind of not have to be right there with it, but yet be able to see kind of the end product of how they're doing with sorting. And then this one is the shaped groundhogs, and each month has kind of a shaped theme. So you can see that these are to look like little groundhogs, but they also are shapes. Their heads are shapes. So they spin the shape spinner and they find that shape on the board. And I always like to do this with them because I provide the vocabulary for them. So you spun an oval. Oh, let's see if we can find an oval. And there's 2 of each shape on the game board, two groundhogs of each shape. So I just have them pick one so that they're practicing it more than once. And then, prompting them of, oh, what shape did you get? And start to see if they are able to name some more of those shapes. So that's really what that game is all about, just kind of making a fun way to recognize shapes and talk about shapes. And then have patterning. I love to see inside their little minds with patterning. I have found that A-B patterns, usually by this time we've got them knocked down. That's good. ABC, pretty good. A, B, B, struggle, right? Because it doesn't roll off the tongue as easily. And so they're not hearing it as well. So we do still practice patterns and more complex patterns. And then I love when we do this, then I start seeing patterns magically popping up all over the classroom, on the light table, in the block center. So that's always a fun thing too, because you see that what you have helped them practice and learn together, and maybe a small group um, gets reused. The idea gets reused, and they're really showing their learning by creating their own patterns. So some patterning strips, and then they add on the extension of the pattern. And I usually do this with them first because I really kind of want to see where they're at, and then I will put it in the classroom in the centers for them to use. This one is measurement. And many times they understand the idea of measurement, but not necessarily how it works. So these pictures from black line to black line will be so many hearts tall or long. And so we can really put a lot of vocabulary in there when they're doing it. I also sometimes will pull out the chalkboards or a dry erase board, and I will write that number so that they can see it. So the little boy in the picture is 3 hearts tall. And so I will show them this is what this looks. This is a 3. He's 3 hearts tall. And then we'll pull another one of the pictures, and oh wow, she's 5 hearts tall. Who's taller, right? We can start using all that amazing vocabulary. This could also be used in a whole group, but I like it in small group mainly because that child can work on counting the hearts from the bottom up, right? And measuring, non-standard measurement, obviously, but it's that precursor to actual measurement. So we talk about how tall they are, how long they are, who is longer, who is tallest, who is shortest, all those great math words that they're going to use later when they do standard measurement. And let's see, I have 2 more. This one's seriation mat, so putting things in order by size. And the mat helps tremendously. Take away the mat, and some children really struggle with how to organize the pictures. They may understand what you're supposed to do, but don't necessarily know to put them in a line. So that's been interesting. But with the mat, they do really well. They can visualize it. And so I like to always start with the mat. I always like to show them an example of, look, this one is the biggest. I'm going to put it here. And then I lay out the other 3. Which one of these is the biggest? So I kind of almost do the activity myself and talk myself through my thoughts so that they can kind of see what's going on, because a lot of times it's not evident to them to put this in order by size unless they've had experience in that before. So there are 3 different pictures sets that they can put in order, and then you can take away the mat and see if they're able to do that without that support, because many times, even in later months, maybe I won't get out the mat at all because they're familiar with what seriation is, and see how they organize it. So it's another good little glimpse into their brains. And then the last one that I have to share with you is matching numeral to quantity. And this is one we do a lot because not only are we recognizing numerals, we are also counting sets. And so on this one in particular, there's love bugs, and they all have a certain number of hearts on them. And so they count the number of hearts on the love bug, and they find the matching numeral bug jar on the mat. And so I usually have to show them how this works, right? Because his antennas might be hearts, but we're not going to use the antennas to count. We're just going to count his spots. So I'll model it for them and find that numeral. If I have a kiddo who is not yet recognizing all their numerals, I take away the 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 side of the board. So that's why it was created like that, so that you could work on the lower numbers first. So I take away that side, and I take away all of the ladybugs that are the love bugs that go with that side. And so then we just focus on 1 through 5. And that's been helpful because it can be frustrating if they don't know the numerals yet, but yeah, they're trying to match to them. And a longer frustrating activity is not going to keep them engaged and make them want to come back and play more games with you. So that is something that I generally do too. Beginning of the year, might even just slide that 7 through 10 out of the way because I got shorter attention spans and work on just the 1 through 5. So that's an option too, but I like them. And obviously, this is one after they play, they understand it, and I can put that in the math center too. And sometimes I can just add simple things like putting these in a bucket or putting them in a sock where they have to pull it out and it's more of a surprise element of which one they got, and then they count and then they match it. And so there's lots of fun ways to extend these that make them just a little bit different. Even just using a puppet, sometimes I'll just use a puppet to hand them the cards, and that makes it even more exciting. So just kind of thinking outside of the box of how we can make learning, and especially the math skills that tend to be more academic skills, they tend to be more memory and rote practice, and how we can take that and make that something that kids want to do and something that kids learn from, right? So I hope you found a game or two that maybe you want to play with your children, because I'll tell you that some of them are just downright fun to watch them play, watch the joy just ooze out of them. And you get to kind of in your head go, oh, you're learning a lot right now, but you don't know it. And that is the best feeling ever. So I have the link to these if you're wanting to look at the February ones. There's also March available, and then I'll be getting April through November done. December, January, February, March are the ones that are finished currently. And I have a plan to finish them all because they have been working really well for us. And so I wanted to share those with you. But again, you can easily create these without printables. But I know sometimes we are super busy and we just need to be able to print it out and laminate and get it ready. So I have that available for you if you need it. But I hope you found some games that you maybe haven't heard of before or that you forgot about, and I kind of brought to your attention. And go out and play those games, because games are just amazing. They are fun. If you haven't tried them, I so encourage you to try them. Drop me a comment. Let me know. Are you a game playing classroom like we are? I would love to know, because it makes life more fun, makes learning more fun. You guys have a great Sunday. Thanks for joining me. I hope you found something helpful, and I will see you next week. Bye.